If you truly understood the philosophy and economic forces behind Bitcoin, the way that Bitcoin maximalists and longtime honey badgers do, you would never sell your Bitcoin. I know that sounds very, very controversial, especially if you're new and you've made a little bit of profit at these all-time high prices. You're thinking, hey, is it time for me to take profits? Well, in this video, I'm going to explain the economic and philosophical reasons why it's never a good time to sell your Bitcoin. One of the biggest questions that I see come up again and again and again, whether it's on forums, Reddit, on social media, or in Telegram groups is, hey, should I sell my Bitcoin right now? Is now a good time? Especially at the time of this recording, we're experiencing all-time highs. I think as of right now, Bitcoin is at around $68,000. And a lot of people are wondering, hey, is this a good time for me to sell my Bitcoin? And I want to give you all some of my thoughts based on my years of being in Bitcoin, as well as my understanding and research around the philosophy and economic forces that drive Bitcoin as an asset. And I want to tell you that you should never sell. Now, that's a bold statement. So let's go ahead and explore why, so you can get some insight into why I am so bullish on Bitcoin long-term and why so many of us, myself included, do not sell a single Satoshi of Bitcoin. First of all, let's start from the absolute most obvious reason. Bitcoin keeps going up, and it's going to continue going up, at least if you ask me, and if you look at the, again, economic forces. There is a limited supply of Bitcoin and a halving coming up every single 4 years until 2140. That means less Bitcoin being put on the market, in addition to more and more and more people trying to get that limited amount of Bitcoin. More and more of us are buying and holding as much as we can, which means that even less of it is actually in circulation, and it is becoming increasingly rare. So the simple fact is that Bitcoin's price on a long-term basis is probably going to go up. I know a lot of Bitcoin maximalists like myself believe that we will see $1 million Bitcoin in the next decade, if not $5 million per Bitcoin. Now, I can't promise any of that, and of course, this isn't investment advice, but if you look at the last 12-year history of Bitcoin, of course, past performance is no indicator of future performance, but we know that Bitcoin continues to go up and up and up because of the fixed supply and increasing demand, and Bitcoin has only started to reach the masses. It has only started to be adopted by nation states, hedge funds, public corporations. What happens when 8 billion people realize that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin? This is what we in the Bitcoin community jokingly call the number go up technology. The simple fact that Bitcoin is designed and engineered to increase in value over time because of the fixed supply and, again, increasing demand. So quite simply, if you sell your Bitcoin today, you are going to forfeit future profits. If you sell it tomorrow at $70,000 per Bitcoin, you are going to be really upset when it reaches $700,000 per Bitcoin. Now, I know you might think, hey, I need the money right now. This is my moon, as we say, my end of the journey, my goal. I've reached my goal and now I want to sell it. But we'll cover that a little bit more in a second. My point here is that the value of Bitcoin is essentially infinity over 21 million. There's no cap on the amount of value that can be put into Bitcoin, whether it's people selling gold for Bitcoin, selling dollars for Bitcoin, working for Bitcoin, the increase in population, the increase in human productivity, in technological output, GDP, all of that is the possible market cap value of Bitcoin. And that is divided by 21 million. And that's why you sometimes see people wearing shirts that say infinity over 21 million. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is if you sell your Bitcoin, you are going to really regret it when the price increases. And it is my firm belief and experience that it's going to increase and continue to increase, at least for the next 120 years, while they're still issuing new coins. No one knows what's going to happen, but it's probably going to increase even after the next 120 years. So what I'm trying to say is you're really going to miss out on a lot of profit. At least you're missing out on potential profit as measured in dollar terms or fiat terms, but we'll get to that in a second because I want to actually talk about the profit that you are going to make and remind you that anytime you sell your Bitcoin for fiat or for any other currency, you are going to be taxed by your government, either short-term or long-term capital gains, and that can be 15% tax, or it can be your personal income tax, which may be as high as 50%. Now, some of us believe, I certainly believe, that the laws are going to be changing around Bitcoin. It is eventually going to be classed as a currency, and some governments, for example, the government of Israel, where I live, do not tax your profits on foreign exchange rates. For example, if I travel to Europe, at least to the best of my understanding, and I happen to buy a bunch of euros while I'm there by putting my ATM in the machine, and I withdraw the euros, and then I come back to Israel and I go, oh gosh, I forgot those euros in my wallet, and I convert them to shekels. Say I've made a few shekels in profit. Well, I'm not actually taxed on that because it's considered currency exchange, which is not taxable in all countries. And right now, Bitcoin is considered an asset in many countries, and so your gains are considered taxable. Well, that may change in the future, and also government regimes may change. They may change the way they classify Bitcoin. The tax regimes may change to such an extent that we see governments reducing tax rates as they become less and less relevant. I certainly believe that we're going to see nation states lose a lot of their power to tax us in the future as we, as digital citizens, no longer need a lot of the services they provide. Now, I'm not a crypto anarchist. I do believe that we need governments, but I also am crossing my fingers that in the next couple of decades, something is going to change to the extent where governments are no longer taxing us at 35 to 50%, but they're able to reduce the tax burden on us as citizens. And if that happens, you're going to be really upset that you sold your Bitcoin and paid 50% tax when you could have paid 10% tax, or hopefully even 0% tax if Bitcoin is reclassed. So while it may be great to make those profits in dollar terms, well, again, you are going to pay a lot of that in taxes, and you're losing out on much, much further potential profits down the line. And of course, it may very well one day be the case that Bitcoin becomes a global reserve currency, in which case it's going to be really, really hard for governments to tax you for just using your money. Of course, they do that today with VAT, but to tax you on top of that for realized gains is going to be very, very difficult if Bitcoin becomes a globally recognized and accepted currency. Now, the next point on why you should not sell your Bitcoin is a philosophical one, and it is honestly the main reason I wanted to make this video. What would you sell your Bitcoin for? I mean, every other form of property, if you truly understand the value of Bitcoin, if you understand what makes Bitcoin so unique as an asset in the way that Michael Saylor does, he calls it the alpha predator of property, digital real estate, if you will. If you truly understand that about Bitcoin, then you understand that anything that you could possibly sell it for, even gold, even dollars, even euros, even real estate, is less of a sound money. Bitcoin is the most sound, hardest form of money or property that humanity has ever created. And therefore, every single sat that you get your dirty little hands on, you should hold and cherish, because anything else that you could sell it for, besides maybe selling it for your health or more time on this planet, is going to be a trade down. If you sell it for dollars, you are selling it for unsound, unstable money that inflates at a rate of 2 to 5% per year, that can be stolen from you, and all the other things that we have talked about in a past videos around why Bitcoin is the soundest, firmest form of currency and value and property. So what would you sell your Bitcoin for? Anything that you could possibly sell it for, except, like I said, healthcare expenses is going to be inferior. Now, I understand there are things in life that you want to use your money for. I mean, what's the point in owning all this Bitcoin if you're never going to enjoy the profit or the value that you have stored up? And I get that. I totally understand that. I always jokingly say when people ask me, when are you going to sell your Bitcoin? I say, I'll never sell my Bitcoin, but I will use it when one coin will buy each one of my children an apartment in which they can raise my grandchildren. And I firmly believe that, by the way. I believe that Bitcoin is going to that price level, but I also believe that the only good reason for me to ever part with my Bitcoin will be for something that is so important, something that is so valuable for increasing the quality of life of my family, my children, that I'd be willing to part with these precious, precious Satoshis that I've managed to snatch up before the rest of the world understood the value and power of Bitcoin. Now, I'm an extremist. I understand that. But I think the more that you understand just how rare those 21 million Bitcoins are, you will understand that Bitcoin is like gold. Your grandparents probably didn't sell their gold unless they had to flee for a war. They probably passed it down to your parents, who passed it down to you, and hopefully no one in the family has had to sell it unless they've been in dire conditions. And I think Bitcoin is the same. I've heard Michael Saylor say, you don't really own Bitcoin, you just hold on to it for the next generation. And I believe that to be true. What I'm trying to say here is that if you're still thinking about taking profit on your Bitcoin to convert it back to money or fiat, then you're missing the point entirely. Bitcoin is the soundest form of money, and any profit that you would take would just be in inferior fiat money. It's kind of like this joking meme that you see of Morpheus and Neo, where Neo says, are you telling me that one day I'll be able to sell for 10x the price? And Morpheus says, well, Neo, I'm telling you that when you're ready, you won't have to. If you're still thinking about taking profit out of Bitcoin, then you've missed the point entirely. Bitcoin is the finest form of saving your money. The only other competitor that I can potentially see is real estate. But even real estate is subject to inflation. We could do a whole other video on my thoughts of Bitcoin versus real estate. I'm heavily invested in real estate. I believe in real estate, but I fundamentally still believe that Bitcoin as a savings vehicle is superior. But as I said before, there are things in our lives that we want to use our money for. There are situations in which we may need the money for healthcare expenses, for supporting our family, for economic difficult times. And there are things that just increase our quality of life. We want to have more children or expand our family. That costs money. We want to buy a new home or buy something for our children, send our kids to college. There are so many things in life that cost money that are going to improve your quality of life. And I believe fundamentally that there's no value to money whatsoever if you don't use it and enjoy it to improve the quality of life of those around you and those you love. And so what if I need the money? What if I actually need to take profits? I'm going to have to sell my Bitcoin, right? Well, no, technically not. You see, selling your Bitcoin, as we mentioned before, is a taxable event. And it also means that you are letting go of those precious Satoshis, that perfect money that you have managed to claw your way into. If you sell it, you're going to pay taxes and you're never going to be able to buy it back at the same prices. And that is why there are companies out there like Celsius and BlockFi, which will actually allow you to borrow against your crypto. You simply transfer to them Bitcoin. Usually it's 2 or even 4 to 1 value for the amount you want to borrow. And then you borrow fiat if you need fiat. And you are able to get a loan at as little as 1% interest, which is cheaper than any mortgage you're going to find out there from a traditional bank. And at the end of the process, you actually get your Bitcoin back once you've paid back the loan, even if the Bitcoin has tremendously increased in value. So it's a huge win-win for you. You not only avoid having to pay taxes, you also are able to deduct the interest that you are paying as an expense, depending on what the loan is from. And again, this is not tax advice, consult your tax advisor, but you are also able to retain your Bitcoin with all the unrealized gains and pay no tax whatsoever on being able to use the value of your Bitcoin in the same way as if you were to borrow money against your house and use that money to remodel your house. So no, I still wouldn't sell my Bitcoin. If I need $100,000 or $200,000, I would find ways to, and I'm not admitting that I have that much in Bitcoin or anything, but I would find ways to borrow that money rather than spend my Bitcoin, whether it's borrowing against my apartment, whether it's borrowing from a traditional lender, whether it's borrowing against my Bitcoin. I would find ways to borrow that money rather than let go of my Bitcoin. And again, one day I'm hoping that we do see a Bitcoin standard where Bitcoin becomes the global monetary reserve currency and it becomes accepted by people everywhere. And in that case, yeah, I might just use some of my Bitcoin to buy real estate, buy a new home, buy something that is going to really improve the value of my family for a few generations, improve the quality of our life. But other than that, am I going to go sell my Bitcoin to buy a Lamborghini? Definitely not. I have managed to get a very small amount of those 21 million precious coins. I'm not planning on letting go of any of them unless there's a very, very good reason. I think the more that you understand Bitcoin, the more that you watch this incredible asset grow and develop, the more you understand the philosophy behind it, the security behind it, and the economic sound money principles behind it, the more you will realize that if you are lucky enough to have clawed your hands onto even a few thousand Satoshis, you are going to go down in history as one of the front runners who saw the greatest wealth transfer in the history of humanity and managed to ride the wave. And so no, I wouldn't sell a single Satoshi. There are very few reasons that would compel me to sell my Bitcoin, and I really hope that I've managed to convince you all the same. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it, I really would love if you hit the subscribe button and make sure to hit the bell icon as well so that you're notified every time I put out new videos. I try to put out a new video every week. Sometimes it becomes every other week, but I do appreciate your comments, your thoughts, suggestions, and requests. Thanks so much for watching and happy hodling.